week, Creed 2 hits theaters. That means today we're going to stop and rank all 8 movies in the Rocky universe from the worst to the best. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Chandler, and I started this channel essentially because I was driving everybody crazy around me wanting to talk about movies way too much, and I want to talk about the Rocky movies with you. So join me down in the comment section, share your ranking, which ones do you love, which ones do you hate, and everything in between. One more thing before we get started. Today, there is a massive sale in my merch store, 30% off of everything. That means $14 t-shirts, a bunch of the shirts that I wear in my videos, as well as Sean Chandler Talks About apparel, all 30% off, $14 t-shirts. Check something out. The link is down in the description. And with that said, let's get started. Coming in last place is Rocky 5. Now, coming off Rocky 3 and 4, this film was a bit of a return to the tone of the first 2 Rocky films. And with that, you had the return of John G. Avildsen as the director. So there's a bunch of things in this movie that actually aren't so bad. It attempts to touch on some themes about loss for Rocky with his fame and his fortune, as well as his ability to fight, his broken relationship with his son, as well as taking on a new student. The problem here is that the execution of all of this isn't particularly good. And all of those themes that are kind of interesting inside of this film are done much better in Rocky Balboa, Creed 1, and Creed 2, as those films touch on Rocky kind of losing the fame and becoming a restaurant owner, a broken relationship with his son, as well as taking on a new student who has some conflict with at certain points in time. But beyond that, it feels very out of place in this franchise as it's not particularly inspirational. It presents Rocky as dumber than normal, really bad with finances, kind of a deadbeat dad, and very gullible in taking on this former student, and then it ends with a street fight. And so a bunch of things about this movie just feel off inside of the franchise. It doesn't elicit the types of emotions that you want from a Rocky film. And so even though it's probably not as bad as some people say it is, it's still easily the worst one of the bunch for me. Real quick before I go into the next 7, I really like all these movies and I rewatch them every single year. And so if some of your personal favorites are like 6 and 7 on my list, I still really like those movies and watch them all of the time. With that said, coming in at number 7 is Rocky 3. Now, this is where you can see the franchise going in a more fun, also silly direction. And this is also where you can see Stallone's ego as well as Rocky's ego starting to get the best of them at times. Now, there's a ton of iconic sequences inside of this movie, whether you're talking about the fight with Thunder Lips, whether you're talking about Clubber Lang, Mr. T as the villain, or this being the film where Rocky and Apollo become lifelong friends, which kind of transforms the direction of this franchise in a whole lot of ways. This is the film that establishes all the groundwork that allowed the Creed films to happen. Now, where this one's a little bit lower on the list for me is that I felt like the mix of silly and serious is a bit off in the film, and it makes the serious come off a lot more like melodrama. They tried to play the serious moments a bit too much like those first 2 films, and it just felt hollow when it's coming right after a sequence with Hulk Hogan as well as Mr. T with a mohawk. And so for me, this one always felt a bit off while still, of course, being classic Rocky. At number 6 is Rocky 2, a very solid sequel to the original Rocky and the film that feels the most like the original film in its tone, storytelling, and structure. The drama all feels like a reasonable extension of what we learned in the previous films. The drama feels earned most of the time, and it makes sense. And actually, I think the training sequence and the final fight are probably staged better than the original film. Where this one comes a little bit lower on the list is that the film drags a good bit in the middle, especially when Adrian gets sick. The movie just kind of slows to a halt as we watch Rocky reading poems to her. And then when she wakes up, I didn't feel like her change of heart was earned or explained particularly well. So just a couple things that I think with a slight rewrite, this one might have made it into the top 3 for me. Bringing us into the top 5 is Rocky 4. Now for me, this movie doesn't feel so much like a movie so much as an 80s entertainment product. This is a movie that no other decade could have possibly produced. From the fact that it kicks off with Paulie getting a robot for his birthday, that it's all about America versus Russia, that Rocky's out for revenge, that there's a James Brown dance sequence in it, or to the fact that the movie has 6 or 7 different montages inside of it. This is a film tied to a very specific time period. It's incredibly cheesy. It's over the top.
I must break you.
and it's incredibly entertaining. This is the Rocky movie that I have rewatched the most times. I love to put this one on, the training sequences before I work out. This is a movie that I call a Taco Bell film. It's easy entertainment that's consumable while not necessarily being actual great quality stuff. What makes me put this film over Rocky 3 is that I feel like this film embraces the crazy a little bit better. It's not trying to be based in reality. When it has the serious moments, it cuts to a montage, whereas Rocky 3 tries to still have these really impassioned emotional sequences. So I prefer Rocky 4 over Rocky 3 for that reason. Real quick, before I give you my top 4, remember to give me your ranking down below in the comment section. I'd love to have a nice lively discussion with you about this franchise. Also, after this video, check out this playlist up above of my rankings of some of the top 70s and 80s movies franchises. If you enjoyed this video, there's something in there that you will enjoy. Coming in at number 4 is Rocky Balboa. After a 15-year absence from the theaters, and at a point in time where Stallone's career was in a bit of a slump, he returned to the franchise that made him famous, and we got a film that I thought was a great return to form. Along with Rocky 2, this is the sequel that captures the vibe and spirit of the original film the most, except in the case of this film, enough time has passed that you're seeing him in such a different place in life that it gives you an interesting new look at Rocky, what he valued, and who he really is. The movie feels like it really captures who Rocky would be at this stage of life as this restaurant owner telling stories of the good old days, hanging out with Paulie, and having issues with his son related to his legacy, who is cast perfectly by Milo, who even has the same crooked face as Stallone, and it led to one of the best monologues inside of the franchise.
But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
Add to that, you get another great training sequence in here. My only real issue with this one is that I always felt that it was a bit structurally odd the way they placed some things, but all in all, this is a personal favorite of mine. I might be a little bit biased because this is the first movie I saw in the theater after I got married. We actually went on our honeymoon to go see this film in the theater. Kicking off the top 3 is Creed 2. With this film, they decided to double down on the connections to Rocky 4, the most outrageous film in the entire franchise, and I think they absolutely pulled it off. They found a way to dig deep into some of the themes that could have been true coming out of Rocky 4, and they actually really give Rocky an arc out of it, Ivan Drago an arc out of it, and they found a way to really explore this idea of legacy, fathers, sons, children, life, and the choices that we make. At times it can feel a little bit like it's using pieces left over from previous Rocky films, but I also think it executes on those themes a little bit better. The movie does such a good job establishing the character arcs that even as you get into the final fight, you really care emotionally about both sides. There's things that happen to the Dragos where you're like, ooh, that hurts a little bit as you're watching some of this stuff happen. And one of the things this film does so well is because we care about the characters in the fights, when they're hit in the head, when they go against the ropes, when they go into the corner, when they fall down, you really care and feel it emotionally as well as physically. While this one might stick to the formula, it is a great addition to the franchise. Our runner-up is Creed. When I first heard they were making this movie, I thought that they had lost their minds, but boy, did they prove me wrong. Somehow they found a way to take the material that was left there in Rocky 4 and find a good reason to continue the Rocky story after Rocky Balboa. A big part of that is Ryan Coogler's direction. He finds a way to find real dramatic tension in each of the moments inside of the sequence and real human emotions. And another part of that is Stallone's fantastic performance. The role that made him famous, he returns to it 40 years later and actually got an Oscar nomination out of it. They just find all the right moments to just let him dig deep into who this character is, what he values, and how he would respond to certain situations. And it just absolutely tugs at your heartstrings to see Rocky in this place because of that performance from Stallone. In a number of ways, the film follows some of the beats of the original Rocky, but because Adonis is such a different character from Rocky, it feels fresh, new, and brings new energy to all of it. By the end of it, you've had one of the most emotionally satisfying films in the franchise, as well as another great entry that makes you want to go and work out and pump your fist in the air. But coming in at first place is the original Rocky. For me, this is the quintessential sports movie. It's the quintessential underdog underdog story. And like all great sports stories, it's not really about the sport itself. That is just a visual representation of the inner struggle that our character is going through. The film touches on universal themes that we all go through as we go into adulthood, whether you're talking about finding love or answering the question, do I have what it takes? And just the central idea of Rocky taking a chance on himself to answer those questions. That's why this movie is so beloved and resonates with so many people. And here we are 42 years later, still talking about this movie and with a new entry in the franchise coming out, because it does resonate so true to human emotions and the human experience. And this is the film that kicked it off and captured it so well and set the template for these movies that I absolutely love. Rocky Balboa is probably my favorite movie character of all time. And this is where it all started. For all those reasons, it comes in at number 1. Remember to check out that playlist to the left with some of my best rankings of 70s and 80s movies franchises. If you like this video, there's definitely something in there that you will like. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.